told this story wherever I went. And that was wide and spread. It was as far away as Taiwan, Germany, wherever I went, wherever I lived, I told the story. Well, what the story means to me is that as we approach the anniversary of the museum being open, and particularly the student walkout, it makes me think back to as we were trying to figure out how to get this museum up and running and how to get it to where it is now. It's kind of amazing because you would have to have seen a museum or a building like in this room here. You just had those easels sitting around with a few pictures here and there. And that was about it. That was what people got. Now, it was better than nothing. And there were pictures of the graduating classes and all of that from high school. But to go from that to this was a dream. And how to get here, how to get to this point was almost like a pipe dream, because we had a budget of about not that much, but it was a budget that would not have supported being able to get to this point. $60,000 a year was the budget. That was what it cost to operate the museum at that time. And of course, that was not even going to afford the opportunity to hire a director. So there had to be a lot of thinking about how to get to that point. And we obviously couldn't get there without a director. And the board wanted a director, needed a director, but really had no concept of what they wanted a director to do. So there was a lot of thinking about how to make that happen. We know that we wanted this to be a world-class museum, but did not really know how and what all the pieces that had to come together to make that world-class museum. Fortunately, we had the opportunity to speak with Lacey Ward. He was just coming back from Tuskegee and having helped them to put together the Moton Field Museum. And so we listened to him and his ideas and thoughts on how to make this go the way we want it to go. And so we eventually hired him as the first director to do that. From that point on, it was a complete series of meetings and getting with organizations like the Virginia Historical Society, various museums. We made various trips to DC. You know, it's like anything else, a kind of a trial and error to see what would fit. Some things didn't seem to fit well with what our concept might be. And even there was an attempt at one point, we thought we had a company hired to do the museum, to do the thinking. But apparently that did not work out. That company had done Birmingham, but they were not a good fit for here, for what this museum wanted. Community-wise, people felt like they wanted this museum to have desk chairs and things from the era in the museum. We've had people to want to donate things that came from that era. Well, first off, we knew that if we were accepting things from people's homes and places that they were keeping these things, those things were in a safe place there. But we didn't know how to protect those things at this point. And so I had, along with Lacey, had gone to our first Virginia Museum Conference. And that was one of the things that, one of the workshops that I focused on, was how do you handle the artifact? And what do you have to do? How do you protect it? And so when I finished with that, I came back, and there was all this talk about everybody wanting to bring in this, they want to bring that, they wanted to, particularly with pictures and things that could easily be damaged. And I said, hold up, we need to first educate ourselves on how to manage those things. And if we even need them in terms of telling this story, we need to flesh out what this story is going to be. It doesn't make sense to have a bunch of stuff, but it's not cohesive with what you want that story to be. And so we had to really think through all of that. And it seemed like we were taking an awful lot of time to try to figure it all out. We had a lot of help. Dr. Smith helped us with thinking through a lot of that. And we had history professors from Hamlin, Sydney, from the University of Georgia, and various different places, people that had the academics and had done the research, looking through court cases and all of that, to help us with putting together what we now have. And I think that was hard for the community to accept, because there were things, what we eventually decided is that the museum needed to be able to tell the story, the backstory, things that everyday person would not have known, things that went on behind closed doors that had been found out about what happened during those times. It was tedious work, but it was rewarding work. We attempted to get community input. We tried to get people to come forth to tell their stories. And people were very, very shy, skeptical, or maybe we hadn't gained the community's trust enough for people to be willing to share the story. And we realized that still there was a lot of pain from those days. And people were not ready or willing to share those very personal stories. But we did have, events at the museum to bring people in. And so there would be programs, different programs. Some were related directly to the story, and others were not necessarily related, but just to get people into the museum. But it was very difficult. And I think one of the breakthroughs was in getting that first magazine developed, because people could come forth and tell their stories, those that were willing. We didn't get that many, 10 stories, but only 9 got printed. But 9 stories got printed, and that was a good start. And as people saw that, then it began to gradually grow. The next time, I think we got 18 stories, and it's gone on from there. I think it has helped develop a community pride. Unlike in the early days, this was just a building sitting here, and people would drive by maybe or come in, well, I used to go to school in that building. But beyond that, there was really not a lot of thinking about how this building connected to the story. And that was one of the things that, as we were developing further the museum, the decision was made that the building itself would be the story. That people would come in and they would be able to read and see the backstories. And so I think that as people began to understand that, there was a certain amount of pride that began to develop. As they noticed and watched the building being rehabbed, I started to say transformed, but it wasn't really transformed, it was rehabbed. The building was not changed from the outward appearance anyway. And so people could see that, oh, this is not changed at all, but it looks nice. And so I think that as that began to happen, people began to develop some pride in this. As the stories began to pick up steam and various different outlets, and we could get some national and international attention, I think that helped a lot with bringing the community along. I can tell you that we have traveled quite a lot, and whenever we travel, my wife and I, we always talk about this story and this museum, and we carry those magazines with us. Those magazines have reached places as far away as Alaska, New Jersey, Florida. So we dropped off pieces of it, and sometimes, I remember I think we were someplace in New Jersey, and we were checking out of a hotel, and with every opportunity I get to tell the story, I will tell the story. So we were talking to the desk people in the hotel, and I said, hold up just a minute, let me go bring you something. So there were two of them there, two people behind the desk. I went out to the truck, got 2 magazines and bought them in. There was a third lady there that I didn't know about. So now we're at the truck and we're getting ready to pull out. This lady come running out of the hotel. Please, do you have any more of those magazines? Can I have one? And so, it's just, people are hungry for that information, and particularly for those that have never heard the story. It's unbelievable. It is unbelievable to people. I had a newspaper, not editor, but a reporter, I think. I want to say he was from Switzerland, and he was just here. I don't know for sure what brought him here at that point, but I gave him a tour, and he went back and he printed the story. So and of course we know about Fabrice in France. He continues to work with this story and developing. He's developed 1 or 2 movies. I've had, people from other parts of the world that has come and listened to the story. And so it's becoming, or has become, much more worldwide. And people in the community now can be assured that this is not just a little place in the middle of Virginia that nobody's ever heard of. It is important to the world. And it's kind of like when you think about what happened yesterday, the court's decision in George Floyd's situation, that was, I think, a kind of a follow-on to early events like the student walkout here in Prince Edward County. There have been a lot of discussions about what people are feeling and have felt and why they have felt. And things come up that are brought out, and I'm sure that you guys know this, that people hadn't really thought about, the broader community had not thought about so much, that there were two different worlds. I always think about it as parallel worlds, the black community, the white community, and how those two worlds did not automatically converge. At that point, you might work together or work in the same places, but beyond that, they just did not come together. You didn't go to church together, you didn't go to school together. At the end of the day, you went to your part of the community and other people went to their part of the community. Going from being president of the board of directors to being a docent, actually I was a docent during the time that I was president of the board of directors. And so it was leaving that position as president of the board of directors allowed me much more time to prepare myself as a docent and storyteller. I had developed some things while I was president of the board of directors in terms of how, because I was the only person doing it, period. We could never get anybody else that would be willing to step forward and get themselves trained. But I had to do a lot of research, a lot of reading, a lot of listening. A lot of what comes out of me has come from other people. So I listened to the historians and I listened to people telling their stories. It just helped me to put it together and to think about, that's a different perspective. But then you realize everybody's story has a slightly different perspective because it's how it affected them. And so that becomes very important in telling the story as a docent so that people don't feel left out or forgotten, that they hear the story from various different perspectives. I remember John's family reunion. I didn't know who they were. But then Lacey would always set me up to talk to a group of folks and not give me a full story of who I'm talking to or what I'm supposed to talk about. I'm on stage talking to a room full of John's family members, not knowing for sure who they were. I just thought they were people, coming to see the museum. Joan and I were talking about this just the other day, as a matter of fact. I called her, I talked to her on the phone every once in a while. And she said, you so impressed me in telling the story. You told me things that I didn't even know. I'm going like, are you kidding me? I mean, I'm up there winging it. But it gave me confidence because one of the things that I always worried about was, am I being very authentic? Am I telling the true story? Am I telling the story as it really was? So it was always important to me to do things that helped people to understand the real story. And I wanted to make sure that it was authentic. The way the galleries are set up, of course, as you know, it kind of linearly takes you through the story. And that was one of the things we wanted to make sure that the galleries would make sense as you go through the story. And you could spend a day in each gallery if you wanted to. And I have seen, my sister-in-law has been to this museum a couple of 3 times. And it takes her all day going through the galleries. because she reads each and everything and reads for an understanding. That's the way I also wanted to make sure that I told the story, that people understood it. Sometimes I know that Diane would get on my case. Why it takes so long? Well, because you want to give as much detail as is necessary for people to get the true flavor of what happened. Yeah, you could walk in and walk out in about 10 or 15 minutes, but what do you get out of it? I want people leaving here feeling like, oh my goodness, this is such an important story, and knowing that it's an important story. I hope that it will gain even broader attention. I would hope that at some point we could get a movie people to come and grab a hold of the story. You know, it's like the two ladies that were going to try to do something here, what was it, a couple of years ago, but it didn't materialize. But I would hope that maybe an Oprah Winfrey or somebody like that could hear the story. Because I think that once people hear the story, they become interested and they would want to do something with it. Well, I think that we owe a debt of gratitude to the early developers, to the Martha Foster Council for having the insight and the wherewithal to preserve this building. Because without that, we would be at a loss. You know, they had the insight enough to know that the county wanted to just get rid of this building and it'd be gone. And the council thought that this was too important a story to just disappear. So as in the very beginning, the meager beginnings, I don't know that they saw or knew exactly what this museum would become, but it was so important that they have that fortitude, that early fortitude to preserve the building and let it grow from there. And as for people that had worked in the early days of the museum, they virtually had to be very creative in doing things. It was interesting that how they had to raise money, how they had to raise money just to keep the lights on. And they knew that certain things needed to be done, but there was no money to do it, like the windows in what is now Gallery 5, I'm sorry. Those windows at the top were bowed out. There was a space about that much at the top of the window between the inside and the outside of the building. There was no money to repair that at the time. So you just have to think about what people did to make it work. That window had to be replaced completely. That's the only window that was replaced, the only new window in this entire building. And then we had to think about how to repair the building without making appearance changes. And particularly the windows. And how do you keep it warm in the wintertime and cooler in the summertime? Because these were not windows designed for climate control. But Lacey found, of course, I think it's glass, glass folks. They came up with creating a storm window to attach to the outsides of these windows, so it does not impact how the windows look. And it's like people would look and, well, what are they doing? I think that, like I said earlier, those folk, a huge debt of gratitude for the amount of work that they did and the thinking that went into doing what they were doing. I would want to say that the museum itself should become a piece that is community pride, both for all of Prince Edward County. That Prince Edward County would be able to look at its history and know that, yes, it was wrong, it needed to be changed, and that this museum shows how that change has taken place, but not be embarrassed or ashamed. I think that Prince Edward County has an opportunity to take this story and show in today's world and tomorrow's world how a community like this, given that history, can actually come together and make an impactful difference.